which is probably not something a 7-year-old ought to be reading, but it is in fact the autobiography of Sir Richard Branson. And I picked that up. It was given to my dad as a present, I think, and I read that just sort of over a few days, and just got really interested in the way Richard sort of talked about starting a business, because back then, it was something that was sort of talked about in the press as being, really difficult, really hard to do. Maybe it's for people that that sort of chances that sort of, there's a typical British comedy called Only Fools and Horses. The guy opens up his jacket, he's got a load of spoons and silverware in there, and he's a bit sort of, a bit of a rogue, a bit kind of, very close to being on the wrong side of the law. And that was what an entrepreneur was at that time. And I think that's changed an awful lot since then. And Richard, for me, and the book and the way he wrote about his businesses and what he did was kind of the catalyst for that for me. From there I was kind of just getting a little bit older. I used to work for my grandmother on a market stall, and she used to sell pet food. Again, very young boy at this point, and I used to go around collecting up all of the broken dog chews that I could find, because there were loads of them, and I could never understand why they were just thrown away and people didn't want to buy a whole one. They didn't want to buy half of one. They wanted to buy like full ones that weren't broken. So I went around collecting them all up, and I put them all in little plastic bags, and I attached a price to them, and that became the highest selling product on the whole of the store and the rest of her business as well. I call them lucky bags. And for me, that's kind of that's, I guess, the beginnings of and embraces what an entrepreneur really is, which is not collecting up broken stuff and putting it in a bag and selling it, but it's seeing an opportunity. It's seeing where things aren't necessarily working in the way they ought to be, where there's something new that can make an impact and change the way people think about things. And it's just having an open mind and exploring the possibilities. And as I said at the beginning, it's great that you get the chance to do this now and sort of practice and kind of get ready for when you see your opportunity. That was at the very beginning when I knew I wanted to start a business. And over the years since, thank you. Yeah, over the years since, I started to look for things that I thought could turn into a business, but I could never find anything. And it was always difficult for me to know what I thought might be successful. And as you're growing up, you kind of just get really itchy and just want to do something, but perhaps finding it difficult to pick that right idea. And in the meantime, I learned as much as I could. I read some books. I did some courses at school, anything I could to kind of understand and be ready for whenever that idea came. And in reality, it probably never did. And that's the interesting thing, because I sort of then fell into business. And again, this is where I talk about sort of seeing opportunities. So I went to university. I graduated with a degree in computer science, then economics. As I was sort of looking around for my first job, which happened to be in our Ministry of Defence in the UK, I decided I'd had enough of waiting and I was just going to do something. So I built a website and I set up an online magazine. I didn't have a huge amount of knowledge at that point, but I did know what I'd learned in my degree, so economics and politics, which is an interest of mine. And so I decided to start writing about that, and guess what? Nobody read it. Because I put a website up there, and how is anyone supposed to find a website? I wondered what it was I was going to do and how I could sort of make a bit of money from this. And so what I noticed was that at the time in the UK there was a big push towards renewable energy, and lots of people that wanted to sort of think about putting solar panels on the roof, or actually more importantly, not enough people wanting to put solar panels on roofs. And what that meant was there were a lot of companies out there with a lot of money that wanted to advertise their products and services. And so I started writing about the economic impact of renewable energy. And so the publication, if I can even call it that at that point, became something which was all about renewable energy and how it could benefit both on a sort of societal level. So think about kind of how do we improve rural economies and all these sorts of things, all the way through to how can we sort of have a better environmental impact as well. And what that did was it started to build my readership, because this was something that more people were interested in. And over the course of sort of the next 12 months, I ended up with 100 writers for that online magazine, and it started to make a bit of money as well. because I got some sort of sponsorship from these companies that were looking to sell these products. And so I made about 20,000, I think, 18, 20,000, something like that, on that website. And then very quickly closed that down and moved on to the next thing, because that was never what I wanted to do. And you'll see a pattern, which is I'll do something, I'll make some money, and then I'll use that to start the next thing. The next thing just so happened to be publishing. And again, that was opportunistic and a little bit random. And that was because I had these 100 writers that were writing for the magazine at the time. And there were quite a few of them that weren't just writing articles, they were writing books and poetry and all kinds of things. And they were finding it really difficult to get published. And this was before you could go onto Amazon and sort of, put some text into their software and create a book from nothing. And they said, can you help us? And I thought, well, why not? How hard can it be? And so I started to publish people's books when they came to me. And as it happens, at that point, I also had a new job. So I moved from the Ministry of Defence across to the Chamber of Commerce network. And there I was sort of, one of the things that I used to do was to go around to schools and talk about what job opportunities there were available in the local area. And as I spent some time in schools, I was looking at kind of the resources that the children were using to learn maths or to learn a language, to learn English or whatever it might be. And I couldn't work out why there was such a disconnect between what was in those books and what was actually happening in reality. What I actually did then was thought, well, I now know how to publish, and I certainly know how to write some things. So actually it wouldn't be that difficult to start creating books that children might find better, not just in terms of passing exams, but in terms of understanding what job opportunities there are out there and what they have to do to be ready for those. And so we started creating educational resources. We did things around financial literacy, which were incredibly popular. And everything that we did, if we did a maths textbook, it would be something where all of the example questions that you would have to go through, instead of being boring, they would be centered around a person's job. So you knew why you were learning, what you were learning, and how that was relevant to whatever job you might want to go into in the future. And that did really well. And that was kind of something that went out to about 700 schools across the UK at its peak. And then about 5 years ago, at this point I'd become Head of Policy and Public Affairs at London Chamber of Commerce, so advising government on how to create a good environment for businesses to start. Then I got a call and I got asked to create a programme of business support in the UK, which is a boring way of saying, how do you help people to start businesses? And it just so happens that that was for a brand called Virgin, which I think you've all hopefully heard of. And it was a really cool brief because it was myself and a couple of colleagues, and our brief was just go do this, blank piece of paper, which means we could do it in whichever way we wanted to, which was really cool. And it helps when you've got someone like Sir Richard Branson, which can launch the company, and is the figurehead of everything that we did. So over the last 5 years, we've built a program that has supported about 11,000 entrepreneurs, about $70 million worth of funding gone out to those entrepreneurs, and it's literally been not the really popular sort of very obvious businesses that you might see on television, but businesses from as little as someone wants to go and set up a hair salon. Absolutely, we want to fund you and want to get you started in business and show you how. You want to be a car mechanic, you want some tools and a van to go around fixing cars. We'll help you to do that. And we've sort of worked with all those people from all parts of the UK to teach them not just how to get some funding, but how to make the most of that funding when it comes as well. So we run workshops across the UK. We run various programs where we'll work with people on an ongoing basis. And as I say, we've got the funding program as well, which people can take advantage of. And so I suppose that leads me to the final part, really, which is one of the reasons I'm sort of sat here in front of you, which is that my education business typically has been something which has sort of worked with people of your age, actually. Sort of what we would call high school and so on. And in the last sort of 6 months or so, I've taken to launching a new business, which is working with very young children, so 0 to 7 years old. And that's something which is the next stage for me in terms of how big my business can become, and it's a new challenge and so on. It's actually something which I'm launching global from day one. So we're launching in 3 different countries: United States, Australia and United Kingdom at the same time, which is going to be an awesome challenge. So I guess throughout all of that, the thing which kind of brings my story to a nice end really is that about 12 months ago I read another book, and it was called Finding My Virginity. And it just so happens it was Richard Branson's second autobiography. And if you go about 2/3 of the way through, there's a little picture of me in it, in the middle there, which was something I'm incredibly proud of, having something I've wanted to do since I was 7. So yeah, there we go.
Thanks, Ian. Very good. Yeah, you can clap.